everyone, my name is Stefanie Netto, and today I'll be talking to you guys about belief bias and moral behavior and how that relates to Kohlberg's fifth stage of moral development. So I'm going to go through a few things with you first. I'm going to go through concepts, literature, how my paper and presentation try to fill gaps within that literature. Then I'll talk to you about my present study, so my participants, my methods, the survey I gave out. Then I'll talk to you about the correlations I got from the survey's data. And then I'll talk to you about the implications of those correlations. So for a bit of background, my paper really centers itself around this idea of moral reasoning. And moral reasoning is typically thought of as these processes of critical thinking based on logical arguments. So according to Kohlberg, and given the demographic of my participants, we should be at this post-conventional level of moral reasoning, Kohlberg's fifth stage of moral development, where people are typically utilitarian, they're justice-oriented, and overall they're just more ethical in their reasoning and behavior. Still, there's two problems. So for one, despite the popularity of Kohlberg's theories, there are still criticisms surrounding the generalizability of it because they're supposed to be universal, even though his samples were based off of mostly men in Western countries. The second problem is that there's a general lack of research of moral identity's role in reasoning and behavior. So to address both of these, I needed to ask myself, do underlying moral traits contribute to justice-oriented belief bias? Belief bias is the likelihood of accepting conclusions that conform to our prior beliefs, and this was measured using something called a syllogistic reasoning task, which is really just a fancy way of saying I gave statements to my participants, and participants had to look at those statements and say were they valid or invalid. And the logic behind this is that the more dearly held a belief or a set of beliefs, the more incorrect you will be on statements that oppose that belief. So a positive belief bias means you're biased for ethics, where a score of 0 means you're using pure logic. So my cohort was based off of 60 participants from Concordia University, all of which were enrolled in Research Methods 2 during the winter 2022 semester. Because of outliers in the dataset, we had to eliminate 4 of our participants from the correlations that were calculated later on. As for the survey, all of the item orders are randomized to reduce order effects. Each participant was given informed consent, and then there were some main sections that were given to every single person. There was the syllogistic reasoning task, which we talked about. There was the moral identity scale, there was ethical importance, and then there was Hexaco, which measures personality. Using Excel, I compiled all of the data while keeping participants anonymous. So the first thing I had to do was also reverse key results of honesty, humility. I only looked at correlations pertaining to morality variables, but that included honesty, humility from the Hexaco scale. Half of my correlations approximate 0. And what that means is not that there's no relationship whatsoever, it means that there's no linear relationship. But out of my 3 remaining correlations, 3 of them are quite important. So for one, only ethical importance correlates with belief bias, and it correlates significantly and positively. Similarly, honesty, humility, and ethical importance correlate significantly and positively. And then lastly, ethical importance has a moderate correlation with moral identity. So just for a bit of clarification, the line of writing with arrows under each hypothesis title is just saying what I was predicting out of the relationships between these variables. Only ethical importance was conclusive in its relationship with belief bias. We can say that holding a specific belief, ethical importance, makes us biased, where the positive correlation indicates that we're ethically biased. So this is concurrent with Kohlberg's fifth stage of moral development, where we have justice orientations. This also shows us that moral reasoning is not made of pure logic. The second hypothesis shows that ethical importance and moral identity do in fact measure the same thing. But let's take this back to hypothesis 1. If they're measuring the same thing, why don't they have similar correlations with belief bias? And all this means is that moral identity has more variables making it up or related to it. So yes, they're related, but they're only partly related. In terms of hypothesis 3, moral identity and honesty, humility have a correlation again approximating 0, so it's an inconclusive relationship from my standpoint. And hypothesis 4, honesty, humility, and ethical importance are significantly correlated, which is great because it shows that the current scale that I'm using for moral identity is correlated with a more trustworthy pre-existing one like Hexaco. If they're correlated, why wouldn't they have similar correlations with belief bias? Again, this just means that honesty, humility is made up of more significant variables. So that's it for my presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.